Thank you for coming to this presentation and for attending this mini symposium. My name is Villano, and I'm presenting this paper on behalf of our team as members of the Farm Behavior Insights Project, an Asia-funded project that is implemented in the Eastern Gangetic Plains, India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. My presentation today is on behavioral profiling with the aim of obtaining a topology of farmers and offer additional insights for better targeting and designing interventions to increase the uptake of conservation agriculture and systems intensification or CASI technologies. I would also like to mention that this presentation builds strongly from what we already have heard in the previous presentations and hopefully add value in understanding the role of behavior in modeling farm decision-making process. Why do we need to do profiling of farmers? Essentially, the main motivation for doing this work is to identify how farmers' behavioral profile can be used to design, target, and evaluate interventions in our preferred learning style that enable farmers to improve their performance and increase adoption of new technologies, such as CASI and new practices, tools, and technologies in general. And of course, the profiling of farmers will allow us to achieve broad scale out of specific designed intervention to smallholder farmers. And this is applicable to many developing country contexts. Moreover, it's also important to profile farmers in order to identify the key behaviors that are important and also bottleneck in disseminating CASI technologies in particular. As we know, in behavioral change studies, changing behaviors would involve reducing or eliminating destructive behaviors, promoting or adopting appropriate behaviors, or adhering to best practice. In doing this and in understanding behavior, there are many models and aspects that we need to take into account. And I would like to highlight some of that theories that informs the profiling of farmers. And of course, some of these are highlighted already in some of the earlier presentations. First, we consider the psychological influences on behaviors such as attitudes, norms, personality, which allows us to examine farmers' capability and characteristics in order to engage in behavior. Secondly, we consider the different behavioral themes such as a status quo, cognitive bias, heuristics that allows us to examine and better understand certain behaviors. Thirdly, there are a number of theories and models that were considered in order to appreciate behavioral change, including social cognitive theory, theory of planned behavior, and social identity theory, among others. One of the important framework that we also consider in the development of our instrument is the concept of behavioral change wheel, or BCW. The behavioral change wheel proposes a combi approach in understanding behavior. The green circle in this approach is focusing on capability, motivation, and opportunity. For example, physical capability involves the physical skills, such as the skill to operate machines, while physical opportunity is the opportunity afforded by the environment involving time, resources, locations, and also, for example, owning or having their own machines. Reflective motivation, as an example here, is the process that involves plans, self-conscious intentions, in evaluations, belief that what is good and bad, what are the advantages and disadvantages, or what are the pros and cons of CASI, for example. The red circle in the outer layer focuses on the middle layer, focuses on the intervention functions. This actually would reflect what could be done to address the factors identified in the green circle. For example, education, on training and increasing knowledge, persuasion, on using communication, and using of incentives can improve social and physical opportunities. So those are some of the examples of how we can improve social opportunities, including education, perception, and incentivization, for examples. The outer layer, of course, focus on policy categories, including communication and marketing, service provisions, and the like. So those are some of the key elements of the behavioral change wheel, and we have actually included this in the development of our instrument. We have implemented this, and we have implemented this project across the different sites in India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. So we have embedded and integrated all these theories and models in designing a behavioral informed instrument to collect household data. The instrument consists of a set of questions by each theory, and the data is collected from India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. We have used this data in order to conduct microeconometric analysis to profile farmers. For the purpose of this presentation, I will only be focusing on the case of Rajshahi, Bangladesh, which is composed of 746 farmers. The process in itself of profiling is quite involved and it's complex, and I will not provide the technical details in here, but I would just like to note that I have used this data to implement the activities, and herewith is the summary of the main approaches undertaken. First, we have checked for consistency and validity of the data used, including checking using the Cronbach's alpha. Secondly, we have conducted a factor analysis to reduce the number of variables or items in each of the category. And based on the identified factors, we then perform latent profile analysis. A latent profile analysis is a person-centered technique which actually combines the different behavioral variables that are identified on different theories for each of the individuals, and then examines the patterns of similarity. We have used a range of indices in order to check for the number of appropriate profiles, such as the use of AIC and BAIC, in order to check for the goodness of fit of our data. And finally, we have conducted a post hoc analysis to conduct further analysis in order to explain the patterns of the profile that we have identified. Just briefly, the data that we have considered is presented in this table. And as we can see, I have excluded the variables that are grouped in basis of attitudes and goals and aspirations. I've used a cutoff of 0.7 and Cronbach's alpha. The KMO here, the Kaisenmeyer-Olken and BTS test, has actually provided and supported the suitability of our data for factor analysis. So this is just a snapshot of the variables that were used in our profiling. As indicated, I have mentioned I use Stata to run this analysis, and based on the testing of hypothesis, the appropriate number of classes per profile is 3. So I had to conduct a hypothesis test between the number of classes, and what we have found to be the optimal number of classes is actually 3. Using the 746 farmers. It may appear as though that profile number 2 is relatively small, as it has only 52 farmers or 7% of the total sample. However, based on the criteria and latent profile analysis, 7% is already an acceptable proportion to be included as an independent profile for LPA. I would also like to point out that this is only a summary of the results. We basically have measured the marginal effects of individual variables in each of the profiles. I'm not presenting them today because of time constraint, but I would also like to present the standard values of these effects on the predicted means. So in terms of the different profiles, as we can see from this graph, we can see that there are distinct 3 profiles based on the predicted values of the scores identified from the questions in each of the individual theory supported schemes. The vertical axis are the standardized values of the predicted means, and the different colored bars represent the different behavioral variables. For example, blue is self-efficacy, and the green right at the bottom is about the community and institutional support. As we can see from this graph, there are 3 distinct groups showing their responses on behavioral questions. Clearly, profile 1 are those with negative values, profile 2 is a mixed, and profile 3 are those with positive values. Let us examine these individual profiles one by one to dig deeper on what they represent as far as the profile of individual farmers. For profile number 1, as we know, is the majority of farmers. There are 581 of them, 78% of our sample. They are low in everything except for behavioral strategies, which is about information seeking. That is, farmers are continuing to show interest about the CASI technology, and they continue to sought after information about the advantages and disadvantages of CASI or using ZT machines, for example. They continue to talk to service providers about planting some crops using ZT machines. They talk to neighbors or leading farmers about the ZT machines. While farmers are aware and had some exposure in the use of ZT or CASI, for example, majority of the farmers are still unaware of the real benefits and mechanics on operationalizing these technologies. How about profile number 2? Profile number 2 are those that are relatively smaller. There are only 52 farmers, 7% of the whole sample. They clearly sit in between or in the borderline. Some are positive and some are negative. But one thing though that is clear in the results is that self-efficacy is high, which suggests that they have the ability to engage in the use of CASI with good collective efficacy and consider social support as an important element, especially those from family and other farmers and government services. However, these farmers are those that observe that other social capital is quite poor, where farmers do not encourage and support its members when those that are part of the group, and especially in learning new ways and identify how to improve their practices and how to identify innovative practices. On the last part, what we have is the profile number 3. 15% of those farmers are classified as profile number 3. I would consider this group as the innovators. They are the positive and open-minded group. They are agreeable to new ideas. They have self-efficacy and collective efficacy quite high, and they have a very strong social and capital support. They strongly believe in the benefits of CASI, and we have identified the profile of this particular group of farmers. So basically what we have done is we have identified the profile of individual farmers, but let us just look at further some of the features of these individual groups. Some of the basic characteristics of farmers in these groups, as we can see, if we look at closely, some basic characteristics based on observed variables, we have selected and compared, and there are distinct differences between the different profile of farmers. We have can see that profile number 3 are those with strong and high adoption of course, we would expect high adoption of CASI. Those are the ones who are engaged and have attended training, members of farmers group, and also have conducted an extension work. And as we can see, those in profile number 1, 91% of them are actually just relying on their own experience as far as crop production is concerned. So that's one clear indication of the difference between the different profiles. How about some of the key outcome indicators? Clearly, there are distinct and significant differences among the different profile of farmers. The F-test here is actually comparing the different, the p-value here is comparing the differences among the 3 profiles. And as we can see, there are distinct differences, especially in the area devoted to CASI. The CASI area and also the percentage area under each under CASI in each of the cropping season. Now, it is also quite obvious that there's a distinct significant differences, with profile number 3 having the highest income or outcome indicators as far as average is concerned on a per household basis. Now, given that there exists some differences in these indicators, our task as a practitioner is how we could entice farmers to actually increase uptake of CASI, that is to move profile 1 farmers towards the spectrum to profile 2 and all the way to profile 3, so that they can accelerate the uptake of CASI. And so therefore, that's the main challenge for us as practitioners. As I have indicated, this is only part of a bigger project, and what we have found in this exercise as far as profiling of farmers is concerned, based on the foregoing econometric analysis, we have clearly highlighted the importance of increasing knowledge and understanding the benefits of CASI. That is through education, training, and how do we implement this is a question for us, for those who are going to implement extension services. We've also highlighted the importance of communication to induce positive mindsets, and how do we frame the messaging, and the question is another task that we as implementers or practitioners need to consider. And finally, we've considered the importance of providing example to farmers and emulate and aspire, and the importance of social support and social capital and collective efficacy in increasing the uptake of technologies. Some of the possible interventions which are actually currently being investigated that we have implemented in some parts of this project site are through the use of different form of messaging, framing, and nudging, through the use of incentivization, for example, pre-commitment and the use of micro-incentives, field demonstrations, and using the different types of training, and of course, membership in organizations. I would like to conclude this presentation by acknowledging members of the project team. Of course, this is led by our chair and other members from different sides. Thank you very much.